one of the largest and most ambitious N-scale model railroads in the world. Cascade and Rocky Mountain scenery with Milwaukee Road freight trains and passenger trains, trestles, an amazing model of the Portland Union Station, an emerging model of the Seattle's King Street Station, and even a sneak peek into some of the mass production and scenery construction methods used to create this amazing layout. Hi, this is Burr Stewart, and join me for a comprehensive tour of Kirk Reddie's N-scale model railroad depicting the whole Pacific Northwest part of the United States, from Portland, Oregon to Seattle, Washington, over to Spokane, Montana, Idaho, and beyond. This is one of the most ambitious model railroads that I've ever seen, and Kirk Reddie had a team of friends who were helping him build it before Kirk unexpectedly passed away last year. The team got together and helped me make some videos of this magnificent layout, and I hope you'll enjoy seeing it and be inspired to do your own work. But most importantly, this video is a tribute to Kirk and his extraordinary project management skills, his artistic skills, and his contributions to model railroading and N-scale in particular. If you're at all involved with N-scale model railroading, you'll recognize Kirk's name as the publisher of a periodical magazine called N-Scale Railroading, which he published for a number of years from his home in Shoreline, Washington, near Seattle. One of Kirk's friends and helpers, Gordon Kennedy, was good enough to take some video of the layout, which he narrated. So what we're going to do is first we're going to watch all of Gordon's narrated video, and then I'll come back with a second pass showing the track plan and some of the details that I photographed at various times while Kirk was still alive. Now let's let Gordon take it away.
Gordon Kennedy on July 3rd, 2024, giving a brief tour of Kirk Reddie's model railroad in Shoreline, Washington. We'll start in Allentown. Here is the Allentown Bridge crossing the railroad tracks, I believe both the NP, GN, and Milwaukee Road tracks, and Union Pacific used them too. And we're going north past Boeing Field. The Allentown Bridge was built in 1903. It burned in 1956. Kirk's era was about 1950 for this model railroad. Going north, we pass through Georgetown and come to the Argo Junction, Argo Crossing. There was a tower here, but the tower has not been modeled. These tracks heading off this way would have gone to the Seattle waterfront, to the East Waterway piers, the Duwamish River East Waterway. So we continue north on the Milwaukee main line into Seattle's Union Station. This big, beautiful bridge is on display here simply. It actually is the Beverly Bridge, destined for a distant part of the railroad, but this was a place where it could be set up to be looked at. So here we have Seattle's Union Station. It was built in 1911 and originally named the Oregon and Washington Station. The architect was Daniel J. Patterson of San Francisco. He designed a number of stations for the Southern Pacific Railway, San Antonio, Berkeley, Salt Lake City. He also designed the old Capitol building in Olympia, Washington. It's now the offices of the Superintendent of Public Instruction. Union Station was a stub end station. This was the next to last stop for the Olympia Hiawatha streamliner that went from Chicago to Tacoma. After heading in to Union Station, the train pulled backwards to Tacoma, where it was turned on a Y, and the trip back to Chicago, it was again pulled backwards back to Seattle for the Seattle stop. And here the power runs around the train to get onto the eastbound end of it. All is well, and it heads south to Black River Junction and then east to Chicago. So we've staged this to appear as though that bipolar motor is just cut off from the beautiful skytop observation car and is going to run around the train and hook onto the front end of it and take it to Chicago. This is the north side of Union Station with Jackson Street. And the New Richmond Hotel. It was built in 1911. It was rehabbed in 2013 and contains apartments to this day. The Union Pacific's Portland Rose and City of Portland, originating in Chicago, also called on Union Station. The Idahoan came from Omaha. And on the wall, we've got maybe Kurt's fantasy schedule for his railroads, or maybe this was taken from the actual station. So that's a tour of a couple of parts of this massive N-scale layout in Seattle, Washington. Now we will look at the King Street station here at Argo Tower, Argo Junction, looking southward, opposite from the previous view. Tracks dive down into a helix. This is beneath the model of Union Station and the New Richmond Hotel. Down we go, down we go. At the bottom, the helix comes out at the King Street coach yard, which is south of King Street Station. King Street Station opened in 1906. The architect was Reed and Stem of St. Paul, Minnesota. The station's clock tower is modeled after the Campanile di Marco in Venice, Italy. Reed and Stem also designed Tacoma's Union Station and New York's Grand Central Terminal. The previous year, the Great Northern Railway completed the Great Northern Tunnel, which went underneath downtown and then emerged to provide water level routes to points north like Ballard, Edmonds, Everett, Bellingham, and Vancouver, British Columbia. There's the south portal of the Great Northern Tunnel. Today, King Street serves Amtrak and Sound Transit trains. This model was built by Bill Weed, who got it roughed out, and this is where it got stopped. It may be finished or may not. It's always 5:07 here. The south facade was detailed out to show what it might look like were it to be finished. And we've staged an Empire Builder train at the station and a freight train, a Northern Pacific freight train passing by on the main line. So the true geographic relationship of the Union Station and King Street Station are shown with the flat backdrop image of Union Station right across the street, right across 4th Avenue from King Street. So why were things done this way? Kirk wanted to build the Milwaukee. He had the Milwaukee on the main upper level deck of his layout. He wanted to include that signature Union Station and the sub-end yard. Those were built first, and he built out the Milwaukee on the upper level. On the lower level, he allowed his volunteers a free hand to pursue their own prototype preferences. Great Northern and Northern Pacific aficionados introduced their own ideas for developing the lower deck. The Union Street Station was conceived, designed, and built well after Union Street was created on this layout. We have Jackson Street and the 2nd Avenue extension. It's the 2nd Avenue extension. This is Jackson Street. 4th Avenue is in the background. Again, there's a representation of Union Station. And another version of the New Richmond Hotel, it looks like. Here's Main Street. 4th Avenue proceeds northward into the city, and the Great Northern Tunnel takes the trains off to points north. Let's proceed north from King Street Station on the GNNP lines. Main Street with 4th Avenue in the background. The south portal of the Great Northern Tunnel, which goes underneath the city of Seattle. The tracks loop around under the benchwork to come out at the north portal of the Great Northern Tunnel, right underneath the Pike Place Market. Proceeding north, we come to Interbay Yard. And then crossing the Ship Canal, crossing Salmon Bay, is the Bridge 4, Great Northern Bridge 4. There's the dam and locks. The Bridge 4, built by Ron Noka, and it actually works. And I've been warned against trying to operate it without proper instruction. I'm not a bridge tender. Here's the Ballard Station, said to be still in existence, moved off the right-of-way in a private home currently. Ray's Boathouse. Then in some geographic compression, we immediately have the Richmond Beach Quarry, which closed years ago, but was too tempting a object to model to not include in this 1950 model. The Richmond Beach Quarry is now Richmond Beach Saltwater Park. We head up north along Puget Sound to Edmonds. The ferry terminal. The diner is Al's Diner. I guess that's in the real world, or was in the real world. And from Edmonds, we arrive in Everett. Scratch built by Ron Noka. Going south, we come to Black River Junction. The Milwaukee trains is coming from and going to Chicago take this branch in the foreground, which goes up into the mountains and over to Chicago. The right-hand branch with the poles, the catenary poles, goes to Tacoma. The other tracks are the NP or GN tracks. Let's follow the route over the mountains from Black River Junction. The Milwaukee actually ran on streets. The Hauser Avenue, Hauser Street, street running right through the middle of Renton. Looks like the grocery store has an air conditioning crew fixing things on the roof there. Right through the middle of Renton we go. This heads towards the mountains through Maple Valley. Here the scenery peters out a bit. It's a big project. The track on the upper level, on my right, it goes toward Cedar Falls. It loops around at that beige scene break, scene divider. and comes around and approaches us on the left, coming toward us. So this is Cedar Falls, which is near Rattlesnake Lake. It's not far from North Bend. And soon the tracks dive into the Snoqualmie River Valley to head to Snoqualmie Pass. So we go up, up, up the mountains. Many trestles were built in here, which would have been wonderful models. Change Creek, Hull Creek, Mine Creek, and we get a reminder as rail fans, any time is train time. When you're meandering about the mountains enjoying the scenery, be sure to stop, look, and listen. You could be surprised by a train. This is Kirk's rendition of McClellan Butte, which is well on its way up towards Snoqualmie Pass. About 30 years ago, a friend of mine and I got lost trying to climb McClellan Butte. We had lots of fun climbs, but that was not one of them. The route goes on up the mountains. Across amazing trestles. The railroad comes to its high point at Rockdale, where the tunnel takes it to the east side of the mountains. Here's a model of the Rockdale tunnel portal with the little hidey hole, perhaps for a helper or a snowplow, next to the main line. And in a truly amazing feat of model railroad compression, the tunnel is about 35 feet long. It comes out on the Hyack portal is right there. Hyack is on the east side of the pass. Lots of snow. From Hyack, we head down along Keechless Lake. You can see it rendered there. And Lake Easton, on which cardboard boxes are floating. And this would take us to Cle Elum.
Well, thanks, Gordon. That was really interesting. And wow, what a huge railroad. Now let's take a look at the track plan. Gordon Kennedy put together this really nice track plan so we can all understand what we're looking at in the shots that come. You can see on the lower level the King Street Station and the coach yard in Seattle, the Interbay yard, up through to Everett, where the north line of the Great Northern headed up towards Vancouver, British Columbia, through Burlington and Bellingham, and the eastbound Great Northern Main Line went through Skykomish, over the Stevens Pass, through the Cascade Tunnel, and on the east side of the mountains to Burn and the Chumstick Canyon, eventually getting down to Leavenworth and Wenatchee. Moving on up to the upper level, you can see Kirk was working on his first love, the Milwaukee Road, and took it from the Union Station over on the right side, again on the upper deck, past Argo Junction, Boeing Field, through Renton, Maple Valley, Cedar Falls, around the McClellan Butte Mountain, which you'll see a number of scenes of that in the video, and all the way through Cle Elum, Kittitas, and the Columbia River Bridge in the upper left-hand corner towards Othello, which was a major engine terminal for the Milwaukee. Now, you can also see here that Kirk was partway through completing the eastern section of the layout from St. Mary's to Avery and towards St. Paul Pass. And you'll see a little bit of that as well. You'll see the Avery and St. Mary's yards up on the upper deck. But the main thing I want to point out is the Portland Union Station, which is in the center top, where we'll see a number of trains coming and going in these action shots that are coming up. And if you look on the right-hand side of the map, you can see that at Black River Junction, one line went south to Tacoma, and the other line went on the opposite side of the backdrop all the way over towards Centralia, towards Portland. And you'll see those trains go through the Centralia loop as they move back and forth to the Portland station. But if that planned view was a little overwhelming, let's take a look at a schematic diagram that Kirk also had up on his layout wall. And this gives you an idea of what he was trying to accomplish. The coast main line from Portland, Oregon in the south all the way up to Vancouver, BC in the north included all kinds of details that you've already seen as far as downtown Seattle, downtown Portland, and many other spots. And then there were three places that the railroads headed east. One was the Great Northern up at Skykomish and over the Cascade Mountains on the top route. The middle route shown here was the Milwaukee Main Line, which headed across from Tacoma with a branch to Seattle, meeting at Black River Junction, and then heading across a tunnel underneath Snoqualmie Pass and all the way across Washington State into the central part of Idaho and into Montana. Now, at the bottom of the diagram, you can see that the Spokane, Portland, and Seattle also had a route from Portland directly up the Columbia River and over to Spokane, where it also connected to the Milwaukee and to the Great Northern Main Line from Spokane all the way to Minneapolis. So this diagram is the part of this whole Northwest region which Kirk was attempting to model. And we'll call out various scenes for you as they show up in the video. So let's get back to looking at some of the video that I took of moving trains. We'll start with the Columbia River line that ran from Portland up to Seattle. What we're seeing here is a Union Pacific train, one of several trains that shared this trackage. It went back and forth in the 1950s between Seattle and Portland. In this case, we have a southbound train, Union Pacific train that is, winding its way along the Columbia River south towards Portland. And Kirk did one of my favorite things here, which is to put in a series of S-curves so we get to enjoy a shot, just like we're having here, of multiple S-curves and the winding train along the river. You can see he didn't get the river in yet, but you can just imagine what this would have looked like eventually. And actually, I like the way it looks right now. This is great. This train is approaching Portland, again, southbound, and is about to come into the Portland Union Station. Here I'm setting up my camera for a different shot because meanwhile they had sent a freight train up along the same line. So how could I resist not showing this to you as well? So in the inset, we have a shot of the exact same train. We're watching the same train at the same time from two different camera angles, and you can enjoy the magnificence of what you can do with N-scale and large scenic vistas. So there's the freight train coming around the Columbia River. Beautiful F units there. This is a Northern Pacific train now. And here we are coming along that same set of S curves. Very nice. And it looks like the passenger train is already returning from Portland and heading north towards Seattle. Always good to have a meet in a train video, right? Now this UP train is going to show up again when we get over to the Salmon Bay Bridge in Seattle. You'll see it coming through there too. But for now we're getting to see this multiple camera angle with trains going in two directions. On the double-track part of the layout, the Milwaukee Road line was on the top deck, and the Great Northern line was on the bottom deck. So here's the control panel for the Portland Union Station, and we're about to watch a train coming through there. There's our same Northern Pacific F unit train, and it's just approaching the Portland Union Station. A really beautiful model, and if you've ever been to Portland, you'll recognize this building immediately. Kirk had enough to do without equipping all of his engines with DCC decoders, so he built this entire layout with direct current DC, so he could pretty much run any N-scale engine that he had collected over the last 30 years, and these F units were no exception. You'll see occasional glitches in these videos having to do with the relative crudeness of DC controls, but it was working out well so far. You see a little dirty track there in the headlights of the F units. Not surprising considering the enormous size of the room and the difficulty of maintaining all the track. You can see from the scope of this yard that it was going to serve as a staging yard in order to generate traffic coming from the south, from California and everywhere else. Oh, those are some nice units. You can also see here a combination of Cato Unitrack and regular Atlas Flex track on regular cork road bed. They were really doing everything they could to get this layout built. Now, since we're heading back along the Columbia River, we get to see that same set of S-curves from the opposite direction. You'll see that train entering the inset picture in the upper right and then coming down toward the bottom left.
4-speed, or are you good?
It's perfect.
be flickering, but no, there we go.
I'm not sure why the speed was changing at this point. They may have been changing from one block to the next. One of the things with DC layouts is you have to have different control blocks. And the guys were doing everything they could to provide me with a regular flow of trains to take these videos with. And they were enjoying it as well. Isn't that nice? Boy. N scale at its best. You can see my cell phone in the tripod there, taking a photo in the left inset. This yard is in the town of Centralia along the Columbia River. You can see the backdrop that they were working on there. What yard is this that we're in now?
Your Auburn yard.
Auburn or Centralia?
Well,
Depends on the wheelhouse.
it's East Auburn is the yard, but that's also Centralia.
This is a model railroad.
They've been compressed together.
Well, you could hear from that this yard was both Centralia and Auburn, depending on what they were doing. Well, it's not professional video, but it'll be fun to watch.
Yeah.
Good.
It'll be seriously fun to watch. On a big screen TV, it'll be kind of jerky, but I'll do what I can. Hopefully you're enjoying this.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you so much for doing this.
Our next little operating vignette involves Boeing Field in Seattle. It's just south of downtown and north of the Black River Junction, which is where the Milwaukee spun off from the tracks of the Great Northern and Northern Pacific. I believe this may be the same train we were watching earlier, only now it's heading southbound from Seattle towards Portland. Another advantage of N-scale is you can actually make a model of an airport. Long runways there, the control tower. And of course, in the real world, these railroad main lines are located right next to Boeing Field. And there's our familiar passenger train that we've already seen, headed north now from Portland up to Seattle and meeting at Argo Junction. Whoops, there they go. This is the line that heads along the Columbia River and ends up in the Portland Union Station, as we saw. And now we get to see a train coming back from Portland towards Seattle along the same line. There it is.
slower. A little slower, girl.
What?
A little slower. A little slower?
I'd love to show you a variety of trains, but in a way, it's just as good to have these two trains going back and forth so you can get some idea of where we are and how much of the layout was actually built. Again, this is the Great Northern Pacific joint line between Seattle and Portland. And it's being occupied by these two trains, a passenger train, UP passenger train, and a Northern Pacific freight train. I guess this is our third meet of the day, and now it's occurring right in the South Seattle area, just south of Boeing Field. Whoops, there they go. This portion of Kirk's layout was featured in a Model Railroader article not too long ago, and you might recognize it from that. This layout is so vast that even being familiar with the geography around here, I find it complicated to understand. So I'm going to take one more stab at it, even though Gordon and I have both tried to explain it. As we look down this beautifully scenic scene here, this Northern Pacific train is on the Great Northern Pacific joint track down to Portland, and the tracks on the right are the Milwaukee main line, which went from Seattle straight down to the Tide Flats yard in Tacoma, where the Milwaukee's West Coast extension terminated.
Just got about half a second.
Keep it going. The friends of Kirk's that were helping him with the layout were also Great Northern and Northern Pacific fans, so that's why they spent so much time building that track, in addition to Kirk's love of the passenger trains that went back and forth between Seattle, Portland, and Spokane. So you've already seen the trains running up and down the Columbia River between Portland and Spokane. Now we're going to take a look at the Milwaukee main line, which started from the west side in Tacoma. And this is Kirk's mock-up of the Tacoma-Milwaukee passenger station. There's a drawing of it there, the prototype, and he was trying to imitate that here. And this is his version of the Tide Flats yard, which, as you could see, had lots of room for staging all the trains that were headed east, and for that matter south, out of Tacoma. And nice engine servicing terminal there. This looks to me like a big diesel shop in Tacoma. So these double track curved to the left would be the Milwaukee and UP line north to Seattle. And this double track coming in from the left and going straight ahead here is the joint NP-GN main line down to Portland, which the Milwaukee got to run on after the Burlington Northern merger, but of course he's modeling the 50s here, so this is just where the team gets to run the GN, NP, and UP trains between Seattle and Portland on that joint line. Here you got to see a little of the construction details. And this track that curves around, which I can't remember now which yard. I think this might have been a different line that was going to go up towards Burlington. But we won't worry about that. Here's the main valley that we saw trains on earlier. And this again is the Portland Station control panel. Really nice job here. And we've seen this model before, but this was the southern terminus that he modeled, the Portland Union Station. So that's the lay of the land as far as getting from Seattle to Tide Flats Yard and Tacoma, and then coming out from there and south to Portland. There'll be no test at the end of this video if you're not following me, but I wanted to do my best to give you a chance to understand what he was trying to do here. Now, the next piece of railroad we're going to look at is the Interbay Yard in Seattle, and Gordon already showed you the downtown Seattle streets that they modeled. This shows our NP train coming around a helix in order to enter the lower level of Interbay Yard.
Okay, here we go.
And you can see that it was pretty much built with Cato unit tracks.
Oh, is it going down a spiral?
And while this train was entering the yard, our passenger train, as you can see in the inset, was approaching towards the Salmon Bay Bridge from the north.
Okay, ready to go.
All right.
Yeah, you on, Burr?
Yep, we're on, and we got the passenger train coming southbound.
And was about to head over the Salmon Bay Bridge. Here it comes. While our NP train was entering Interbay from the south. So this would indicate we're about to have a meet of some kind, somewhere in between the Lake Washington Ship Canal and the Interbay Yard.
Keep your fingers crossed on the bridge.
And there we go. See the freight train coming in on the inset on the left? At a high speed now. There's our meet. Bang! Nice. Very nice. The Salmon Bay Bridge is a working model that raises and lowers just like the prototype, and I'll have some footage of that coming up in a few minutes. It was scratch built largely out of brass.
All right, now raise the bridge.
Right, just step behind it.
Well, I thought you were going to hold the freight down here to run them across.
Oh, you got him going across the bridge.
Oh, you did. Okay, ready?
I'm
Yep.
not quite ready.
I think now we're going to have a demonstration of the bridge. I've got two camera angles of that for you. And this is just what it looks like in the real world, too. It's a double-track skewed bridge. The bridge tender has a little shack not too far from the hinge where they can monitor what's going on. And of course, this waterway is a highly trafficked boat route in and out of the locks in Ballard, which is a neighborhood in Seattle. You can see some ships there at the locks.
I guess I can't go.
Now, meanwhile, while we've been playing around with that bridge, our freight train has come back from Portland, and so we get to have another one of our little S-curve shots. The station on the right is the Ballard station, which is no longer there. It was moved. But the current commuter rail system in Seattle is talking about building a new version of that station in that location. You notice nobody did any hand adjustments to that bridge after it was lowered. This train came right along in the same shot that we're taking. It's very well done mechanically, as well as being a very faithful rendition of the actual prototype bridge. There you can see the locks in the background. And of course this train is now heading into Interbay Yard. and we'll go around that spiral and end up at the Seattle yards.
I think it'll make it.
So now we're going to move over to the Milwaukee's West Coast extension through the Washington, Idaho, and Montana mountains. The main thing that they got accomplished was building the line up to Snoqualmie Pass. Gordon showed you this already. I just wanted to take one more look at this gorgeous freight train on the electrified main line up in the Cascade Range. There are quite a few trestles along this route, and it was an electrified route, so you can see the trestles as well as the overhead wire poles on the trestles. This was a signature of the Milwaukee Road, of course. Very nice set of rolling stock there representing the typical Milwaukee train in the 1950s. You can see the overhead wires there. Gordon mentioned earlier that this was McClellan Butte, so this must be the approach to the Cascade Mountain Pass at Snoqualmie. And this is really what the Cascade Mountains looked like. A very good model. What a beautiful scene. See all the fallen rocks there. Scree, it's called. Refrigerator cars at the front end. F units with the old Milwaukee paint scheme. Very nice. I like the retaining walls too. This track was not connected to the main part of the layout, as you can see there, but they were getting there. I think this roadway was probably what ended up becoming Interstate 90 route between Seattle and Boston, but in 1950 the interstates hadn't been built yet, so there we are with the two-lane road. You could see down in the lower level the future Great Northern NP lines. This up here is the Milwaukee main line. In the far distance there you see a mountain that I think might be Mount Index over by Everett. I'm not sure which yard this was, but I'm going to guess it was Cedar Falls or one of those places on the west side of the Cascades. You can see in the background the huge scope of this layout and some of the other partially finished peninsulas. Wow, that is really something. I think this is the same area that Gordon described to us. There's the Portland Union Station over there in the distance that we've seen in some other shots. I'm looking all the way across the room from this Cascade Mountain area. This upper bench work is the Milwaukee main line coming in from the Cascade Mountains, and the lower trackage in the back there and underneath. Behind this backdrop here is the Great Northern main line, that curved trestle being the Foss River Bridge, and this yard being the Skykomish yard. Now, west of Skykomish, the line comes into Everett, and here's the Everett station here with the high line and the low line. It was a dual level station. And then of course this is the GN main line along the shore going by Edmonds here. We saw this earlier, the Edmonds Ferry Terminal. And on the upper deck is the Milwaukee main line coming in, the electrified main line coming into Seattle. Nice scenery work along here.
You should have it now. It's not installed.
As Gordon discussed, this is the town of Renton, where there was some street trackage on the Milwaukee Main.
Got 2 more feet before you're in the block. Out of the block.
The Renton Depot.
Okay, I got it.
This kind of slide.
So this is the spot where the lower deck has the Salmon Bay Bridge on the GN main line. And the upper deck here has the Milwaukee main line coming in on the right side. The Milwaukee line to Tacoma on the left side, and the double track GN NP joint main line left of that, where we have the UP coming in.
You're going northbound with the UP.
This very complex area of track work was called Black River Junction.
Oh, okay, good. Keep it going. Let it go.
You're going free-ended.
And as we saw earlier, there's Boeing Field on the left, and we're getting to watch another meet. Very nice.
I didn't record this shot. I didn't know you were going.
Maybe we can do it one more time. It'll be a lot better in the tripod. All right, now since this is the last video about Kirk's layout, let's just take one more pass of some of these beautiful scenes. This is the Milwaukee main line coming down from Snoqualmie Pass. Some of these scenes you've already seen before, but I wanted to give you one more chance to enjoy it. There's the reefer train. Look at these mountains. My goodness. That's not a reefer train. That's a regular train. I take it back.
Planning and the drawing of the panels and stuff.
You guys have on different physical areas, and you have a certain different working on the blocks and theaters?
Right, we're kind of left to our own devices and then kind of do what we think we want to do. I've been,
I haven't seen you for a while.
I've been involved in doing Interbay around here. Pier 91, King Street Station.
Well, okay, you're working on the station.
Although I didn't do the station, I just laid the tracks.
When I was looking at the 3D printed
Want to take
Right.
that train over?
Yeah, Bill in the corner is losing out.
This road is what ended up becoming Interstate 90.
Very far. He built this, Scratch built this good city. It actually works. And then, oh yeah.
switch. Watch dance
What scale are you doing?
This is the kind of modeling you just can't do in HO scale. You need a smaller scale to be able to have this grand a scenery.
Yeah, that big bridge, the Elum Bridge, is the Beverly Bridge over Columbia River, the town of Beverly. And that was the Milwaukee Road. And that's going to go away in this far back, like next week.
Really?
Well, that's where it's
Well, I was impressed.
ultimately going to go, yeah.
Most of the Beverly Bridge is still there, isn't it?
It is. They converted it to a bicycle trail.
Oh, it's open for you traveling across?
Yes.
Something it's worth a trip.
It's just open. Yeah.
I've never been, I just looked at it.
The last time I was there, it was pouring down rain.
Nice way of disguising one of the structural posts there, holding up this very large room. Gordon described some of these trestles earlier in the video here.
There's an NP freight coming southbound. Southbound.
That's why it says eastbound area.
Okay.
Down on the lower level, you can see the Great Northern Main Line under construction with foam scenery. And I'm going to guess that that Helix was the interchange between the Milwaukee at Cedar Falls yard up here on the top deck and the Great Northern Line that was down below. And there's the interchange track there in the front.
Howdy, how you doing?
There's a nice looking Pico switch ready for track work. This is a nice big yard. It would have made a good intermediate staging yard once he started up operations. Now we got some more good overall shots of the layout, this time from a different angle. Earlier we saw that peninsula on the left. You can see the peninsulas on the right that are just starting to be roughed in. And as I said earlier, the lower level is the GN-NP main line. There's the Portland Union Station one more time. And the Milwaukee line is coming in on the top deck over that big wood girder. If I have my geography right, this would be the curving tracks near the Foss River Bridge and the Skycomish Yard. There is the Foss River Bridge. And there's the Skycomish Yard. This schematic diagram here shows all the towns along the Great Northern Main Line that he was planning to model. Gold Bar, Skycomish, down to Everett, and once again we have the Milwaukee on the upper deck and downtown Everett's passenger station on the lower deck.
Burr and his favorite second hobby.
These shots were taken during an open house where a lot of people were wandering around. Here's the coast route with a train coming.
Are you familiar with the Seattle area?
You might recognize these rock walls as very similar to the ones on Bill Sorensen's layout featured in a previous video on my channel.
Puget Sound. So it's Puget Sound out here. This is Bridge 4. Line here. That's built out of grass.
It seems that a lot of us in the Seattle area like to model both the Milwaukee and the Great Northern and Northern Pacific lines. I guess it's natural. That's the Edmonds area right there. There's a semaphore there. I wonder if that would have been used for train orders or train control of some kind.
What tricks did you have to play to get it to where the track was lined?
And then, as we saw earlier, this town on the upper deck is Renton, the home of the Boeing 737 plant and the Milwaukee Main Line, with street running.
To a 1/4-inch styrene strip, and then the strip is screwed up from underneath, so you can actually move around.
They put a plexiglass shield up there to make sure nobody accidentally banged onto that bridge. This was some kind of a sand and gravel operation back in the day, next to Ray's Boathouse there,
How about now?
in the Ballard Station. Will you raise that up for me again? I know we saw this before, I just thought you'd want to see it one more time before all of these pieces are dismantled and the layout is no more.
Did you put some ballast in the can there?
Yes.
That's quite an achievement, that bridge.
The motor's down here.
And that shows some of the electronics that are associated with controlling it.
The bridge has a platform and a motor house up here.
Right, yeah.
And
Okay.
gears.
So you're
I can
pulling,
take it.
you're pulling down here.
Yeah, I'm pulling down, but the real one pulls horizontally.
Just like a Hank's Craft motor or something. And you wind the cable around the truck.
And as you know, if you've been watching this video all this time, this train just went up around the corner and over to the Everett area, and then it turned around and came back here. We have one more meet. I guess this might be the final meet of our video, with the Union Pacific passenger train heading back up there. Kirk had a career with Amtrak, and he was very fond of passenger trains, and that's part of why he modeled this route and was very interested in getting all the passenger trains running as quickly as possible.
I've got a roll of the brush or
And one last look at that bridge.
Structure there is Ray's Boathouse. It's a famous restaurant. You know it? Hey,
My.
I watch your videos.
You can see the dam in the background with the locks, the Ballard locks. One of the #1 tourist attractions in the state of Washington. If you're ever here, don't miss it. It's a fun place to visit because you can always see the bridge go up and down and trains go by, as well as salmon running up and down the ladder in the locks. And as we saw, this is the Interbay yard of the Great Northern, under construction. And there's an interesting diagram showing the complexity of the Black River Junction, which I described below, but why don't we just hold the video so you can see that for a second. This complicated junction is very much close to the prototypical junction and is at the heart of the layout. And if you've watched this video this long, you've been wanting to see this diagram, I just know. So the double track orange, all of the orange is the Milwaukee. The green is the Great Northern and Northern Pacific, and the yellow is the Union Pacific. And so there were shared tracks between all these railroads, but as you see here, the Milwaukee line heading to the left had one branch that went up to the top and down to Tacoma, and the main line to Milwaukee over the mountains was the 3 tracks to the lower left. The Great Northern and Northern Pacific lines in green are the ones that headed all the way towards the Portland Union Station that we've been watching this whole video. And this is a prototype diagram of the Great Northern Main Line across the Salmon Bay Bridge, just north of this Interbay yard. And this is a scene we watched before. You can see the piers of Pier 1991 in Smith Cove. And then the main line heading south goes through Helix and up to where those Northern Pacific passenger cars are. Well, for this final chapter of this tribute to Kirk Reddie's amazing model railroad layout, I just wanted to show you some of the scenes in the back of the room where he hadn't finished the layout yet, but he was staging a lot of materials and working on various production processes along with his friends. For example, Dick Volkman was mass producing the catenary poles and insulators. Here you can see a bunch of overhead catenary wires and trees under construction, and some very unfinished scenery over on the other side there. Again, it was Dick Volkman who came up with a very clever way of making the green insulators, as you see there. I believe he was using plastic flossing brushes for that. It was very clever. And Kirk did a lot of this scenery using plaster cast and foil. That was starting to look pretty good too. I can't tell you exactly where this is geographically, but it was obviously a very extensive mountain model railroad. Nice bridge there. to the telegraph poles and the river detailing. Beautiful. And this is the St. Mary's, Idaho yard. And he had a lot of nice backdrop scenery here that I'm going to show you. This is the other side from that workbench where he was building the trees. That's a house built right on the backdrop there. You can see I came close to it so you could see it's not a full building. Another backdrop building. Really impressive modeling. This yard had both a depot and a maintenance area. And some sort of a lumber mill. Note the smoke coming out of the power plant. And a few commercial buildings along the main street in front of the yard. And off the main line goes towards the west. More scenery on the back of this back peninsula there. And you can see some early bench work for the grades. Grade curving around. Storage shelves, a couple of small modular layouts that he built for display purposes. Raw materials, lots of raw materials. Can you imagine for such a big project? And that's an overview from the other side, from the back side, looking towards the area that we've been viewing this whole time. We'll close just by looking at some of the rolling stock modeling. This was an SP&S hood unit with a signature GN caboose. And here's a train, again an SP&S train in action. So we're going to continue to miss Kirk. But everyone involved in this layout has just been thrilled to work on it over all these last few years. So, on behalf of Kirk Reddie and all of the team that worked on his fine layout, we hope you've enjoyed getting to see how far he was able to get before his untimely passing. And it gives you a little bit of appreciation for what is possible if you really dream big in N scale. The footage in this video was captured by me, Burr Stewart, and Gordon Kennedy. And if you or anyone you know has other video footage of Kirk's amazing layout, please get in touch with us and maybe we can do a second section of this video and showcase some more of Kirk's layout. So for now, this is Burr Stewart on a very sad occasion, wishing you much appreciation of trains.
They're about perfect speed there.
Yeah. Bill will have to adjust to that speed. Okay.
And we'll close with one last shot of the Salmon Bay Bridge over the Lake Washington Ship Canal in Seattle, raising and lowering.